Cool. I've lost one already. There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. It is Three Blokes of Ball and BOD. Nathan, sorry about that, mate. It clicked on and didn't take me to the studio. There we go.
Lynn's at it again, but
I did that to myself the other night. Ladies and gentlemen, Big Joe Shep, founder and Chief Bloke of Three Blokes of Ball and BOD. And you're very welcome to tonight's flagship show, Three Blokes of Ball and BOD. But there's another fab. Look, me all excited like a kid, 56, geez, like a kid, with the great Nathan Parker, who runs Don't Give a Ruck podcast, and it is a joint show with Three Blokes and Don't Give a Ruck. I've been a big fan of young Nathan since we met a good few months ago now, and the stuff that he has been doing on the podcast, you gotta go and watch Don't Give a Ruck podcast and some of the stuff, because he's been doing some stuff in concussion and he's been speaking to some phenomenal players out there. Nathan, welcome to the show. Firstly, thank you for taking the time to sort of co-host this with me, mate. It's really, how have things been going? I believe you've now finished uni, you've qualified, the podcast's up and running. Tell us all about it and who you've been speaking to, mate. Tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, well, it's been crazy few months. I think the last time we talked, it was we were right in the middle of the lockdown, weren't we? And I think I had another 6 or 7 assignments left. So I don't know how the hell I got through that, but managed to get it in the end. And we got here by got chatting by talking about my documentary and the stuff on concussion. It's led to today. So it seems like years ago we set this up, and now here we are. But yeah, it's been going great. As soon as I graduated, I thought I'd get a podcast out there. Keep myself busy. If anybody wants me to work for them, I'm free. but yeah, the people I've spoken to over the last few months has been quite crazy. The likes of Shane Williams, Martin Williams, Sean Fitzpatrick the other week, and 6 years ago I was a cleaner. I was cleaning toilets and that, and now I'm talking to some of the greatest players they've ever been. So it's been a pretty crazy turnaround.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much for people. Admin of Irish Rugby Fan Forum has just started the watch party. I think that's Dim O'Rourke. Thank you to everybody, to all the forums who allow us to share our shows in and support everything that we're doing. Tonight is a special. It is a concussion special. We've got 2 very, 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 very good guests on for you. But as ever, we are continuing through COVID-19 and beyond. And the primary thing across the globe is we hope that you are safe. Please don't take risks. It doesn't matter what people think, whether it's one thing or another. Please follow the advice you're given, and we can all return as soon as we can. It's for a good reason. So there we go. So tonight, as ever, during COVID-19 beyond, we are supporting local businesses. Coffeedog.ie. Go to coffeedog.ie for all very, 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 very best call. I have to say this because there's a brand named after me now. So go to coffeedog.ie and put in the promo code SHEP, capital letters SHEP, as in Big Joe Shep, and you get 20% off. And try the Shep's blend, not just because it's named after me, because the founder, great Johnny Pullen, has made a blend after me. I mean, Jesus, what else can you do? It's nobody's going to pull that down, are they? That's absolutely fab. So go to coffeedog.ie. Thank you, Johnny, and we'll keep supporting you and local businesses. And also to our friends at Kinako Biltong, which is Ilse and Alana Van Staden up there in Ulster. Ilse, former Ireland prop, and Alana plays for Cook as well, and Ilse still playing for Rugby for Cook women. And look, hang on, Biltong, very professional using Biltong on the thing, dreadful. But that's the garlic one. That's absolutely Kinako Biltong, and support them. It's Rugby family supporting the Rugby family as well, so absolutely superb. So, and also we've got, who's this Big Rig Rugby? I think we've got a bit of a sort of somebody coming in tonight who's going to be able to tell us a little bit about that. Ladies and gents, you're welcome. If for any reason you lose one of us tonight, it's because one of our guests is in Ballymena. She's normally in Scotland, so she should be okay and safe. And our thoughts go out to everybody in Stonehaven from that dreadful train accident today, and to all the people affected by the floods there as well. Our thoughts go out to you all, that everything recovers swiftly, please God. Aberdeen, you're struggling there because it's in lockdown as well. And Nathan's just about to get hit by thunderstorms. Poor old Stuart, who's going to come in, who's big rugby himself, big Stuart Corsa. They've been hit badly by the internet, so he's up in an attic somewhere, hanging at 45 degrees to the horizontal on his phone, just to make sure we can get through it. So we'll see where it goes. So you're all welcome to the show. Gregor Galway, good evening and welcome. Peter Robinson, Peter, welcome. And yeah, good topic, I think, for you. I thought you. Des McCusker, Des from Rugby Chat and Banter, good man. Hope France is treating you okay. Stephen Newton from the England Rugby Supporters and the British and Irish Lions Forum. Great, go to that one. That's absolutely fab. Steve, you're welcome to the show as well. So, Nathan, we're going to talk about a bit of background to concussion, aren't we? And sort of the perceptions and the causes and the effects and everything has on them. There's some experiences through, and then some of the assessments and things that are in place. Who have we got joining us on the show? Let's get them in. Stop me talking, and let's get on with the gig.
Yes, well, it's firstly great to be here. And joining us on today's program is a former Glasgow Warrior prop forward who unfortunately had to retire due to concussion, Stuart Corsa, and head of Big Rig Rugby.
How are you?
Hey, how you doing? Yeah, good, thanks. As I say, fingers crossed the internet doesn't crash, but we'll see how it goes.
Man, great to have you on, mate, and thanks for your time. Great stuff you're doing with the academy. And
I think I've lost you.
No, I've still got you. Still there? Yeah. Yeah. But we can hear you, mate, so we'll keep going. We'll go in the private chat. Who else is joining us then, Nathan?
And joining Stuart is our second guest, Louise McCullough, who is an orthopedic surgeon in Aberdeen with a special interest in sports medicine.
Lou,
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Good. Well, listen, while let's crack straight on. So, Stuart, tell us a little bit more, flesh out a little bit more about your background and playing, and then what you're doing now, mate.
So I was very lucky to play through the Scotland pathways, and from that I got into Glasgow Warriors. So I was lucky to be an apprentice player, played a couple of times there for about 2 years, then went down to England, played in Rotherham and Doncaster, played Scotland A as well. Came back up to Aberdeen, back to one of my original clubs. Unfortunately got a few head knocks, well, quite a few head knocks, and then had to obviously stop playing rugby. From there, I've sort of worked in clubs, just coaching quite a lot of rugby, then set up big rig rugby. So, and one of our main things is working on technique and safety, in trying to make sure that the players are looking after themselves and doing a lot of work around the contact area as well. So we've been doing that for a few years, and it's sort of growing arms and legs, which is great, and we'll just sort of see what comes from that. Like,
absolutely. And the academy, you do stuff online as well as offline, and you travel as well as having the static location, don't you?
Yeah. So work with a lot of local clubs and schools, do a bit of travelling. I was very lucky to go away with friends of Rwandan rugby, went across and coached the Rwandan national team, trying to get them ready for rugby, just showing them basic techniques, trying to look after themselves, like neck work, and just showing them how to scrum and how to tackle, basically, rather than just being gung-ho. And then started doing wee bits and bobs here and there as well for a few other folks. So it's been good. And as you say, like, more things are coming through the pipeline now. And so yeah, it could be an exciting couple of months. Well, hopefully if COVID sort of decides to disappear. So.
Well, good. Well, to tell us what she thinks that is, and to tell us a little bit more about herself, because this girl has got some backstory. Louise McCullough, Lou, tell us a bit more about yourself.
I don't really know where you want me to start, to be honest. So I'm one of the orthopaedic consultants who works up in Aberdeen. I actually specialise in oncology and trauma, but I've always had an interest in sports medicine and did my sports medicine diploma fairly early on in my career. I studied in Dundee and came up to Aberdeen, and pretty much as soon as I got up to Aberdeen, I got landed with the doctor role at Aberdeen Rugby, or Aberdeen Grammar as it was. Hence how I know Stuart. And yeah, so I still do that. I'm involved a little bit with the SRU, a bit with the academies and stuff. This is just ad hoc, really.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's fascinating the way we take your sort of orthopedic surgery, but this interest that you've got. I mean, these are just the two times I've kept you chatting for ages, as I do everybody. But learning so much. I mean, just the knowledge that you picked up from an interest point of view is absolutely fab. But tell the viewers, you're the first lady to achieve what?
So there's a show called SAS Who Dares Wins, and so I was the first female to pass that course.
There we go. I'm not going to argue with you. Yes, the forces. I'm not going to argue with you at all. Lads, you're all welcome to the show. Nathan, across to you to start us off, Kidder. Thanks, team.
Yeah, well, obviously it's all about concussion on this show. Probably the best place to start for the people watching is, well, firstly we come to you, Louise. What is concussion?
Well, concussion really is a mild traumatic brain injury. It's just caused by a jolt, or it doesn't have to be contact. It doesn't have to be a clash of heads or a knee to the head. It can be just a simple kind of like whiplash, because if you think that your brain sits in this kind of like fluid inside a rigid box, so the rigid box doesn't go anywhere, but if you have any rotational forces, your brain rotates within that fluid, and it creates shear forces, and it's essentially a mild traumatic brain injury.
Yeah, and is it when like the brain hits the skull and then it causes like structural damage?
Yeah, well, it doesn't necessarily have to cause a structural damage, because quite often with concussion you don't see anything on any imaging. So MRI scan, CT scan doesn't necessarily show anything. So you can't really say that it's like I don't know for sure, but I don't think that you can say that it's a structural thing. It's more like it's like a clinical diagnosis from a mechanism of injury, really, to my mind. You can't really test for it. But it's kind of like it's the brain gets a jolt in your head, and it can be that it gets knocked off the skull, but it doesn't have to be. It can sometimes just be like the shear forces.
Yeah. And from your experience, what have been the main causes of concussion with players and people in everyday lives?
So concussion, it can be a clash of heads, it can be a knee to the head, it can be just like a whiplash kind of thing, or I'm quite involved in my time in boxing and combat sports, and often it can be in sparring where you've taken a head and you just kind of jolt back. Yeah. And it's kind of things like that. You don't have to lose consciousness to have concussion.
And say anybody's watching this at home now and they're at a local rugby game, and what are the main sort of symptoms to see when somebody has had a brain injury or a head knock?
So if you have it can be anything simple as headache, dizziness, nausea, vomiting. The symptoms of concussion are so wide and so varied, but often whenever you see somebody on the pitch and they're just a bit dazed and a bit confused, they can't kind of find their feet whenever they get up, you're just like, yeah, you need to come off. And do you know what I mean? You just kind of get a feeling, and you just know that person, even because they don't, like I say, it can be really innocuous. It doesn't have to, you don't actually have to have had a clash of heads. It can be, they're just a bit dazed, confused. It's a bit like Bugs Bunny in the cartoons where he's seeing stars. You can see their eyes are a bit kind of glicket, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
What's the thank you, Johnny Whopper. Actually, just watching the show, just reminding me. What's the expression second impact? What does that describe?
Also, like having two concussions in a close proximity, two concussions close by each other. There's not. So again, I don't think that there's very much evidence with regards to that. But the feeling is that if you have two concussions in close succession, it magnifies your symptoms, I suppose, because your brain's not really had time to recover from the first insult before you go out and insult it again.
I know that we're going to sort of come back on this later. We talked this afternoon on George North, and the whole thing that I think really astounded, as an ordinary fan, it astounded a lot of us that he'd had so many, and then that game we spoke about this afternoon, he seemed to be out on his feet. And I think a lot of us, we don't understand. I know we're going to sort of do assessments for professional players and things to watch out in the scat and all that later, but is Is that a problem where we're setting the wrong example, the wrong message, Lou?
Do you want to just give me a soapbox? So, my feeling about it is that the whole head injury assessment thing's really important, and I feel like it's more important for return to play and such like. But I genuinely feel that even for professional players, if you have professional players, they're setting an example to the amateurs and to age group rugby around you. So if you've got somebody like George North who comes across on TV as having had a head injury, then I think it's very difficult to not take him off and even just to set an example, because concussive symptoms don't have to. You've only got 10 minutes of assessment in the Scat Score to assess somebody like that. If you've got that, sometimes concussive symptoms can take longer to evolve than that. So it's a difficult call, I think.
Joe looks if he's frozen.
And he was the one that was saying the rest of us were all going to die on him.
Himself.
I've stunned him into silence.
Well, I'll continue her on anyway. I'll take on the baton. Sort of, we'll come to you now, Stu. Well. I have to take this on now.
I agree with Louise, though, because...
No, go on.
Yeah, no. But I was just saying, like, I mean, I agree with Louise. It's like monkey see, monkey do. The kids years ago would watch, Johnny Wilkinson and then repeat how he posed to do a kick. They watch how Sonny Bill Williams passes the ball and they copy him. They see George North getting a head knock and he goes back on the field. They'll just do that as well. And it's, for me, I think it's a bad example. I think if you've got a head knock, no matter what the game is, if it's professional, what you're off the pitch. Because it's just stupidity by the players and the officials. Because as I say, it's a player's health that they're putting at risk, and the symptoms can be, post.
And
I think we're breaking up a wee bit as well, are we?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I've got you.
Yeah, I want to talk about your concussions now, and sort of, can you remember your first concussion and how it was treated?
No.
Good question.
Can I just say this for just 1 second? Sorry. So when we were having discussions about this, Stuart and I sat down. My only input into this really was that I had to sit down with Stuart and explain to him what happened because he couldn't remember. And then we wrote it down, and he said, "Oh, I don't remember any of that."
I know. And it's bad. I mean, we can have a laugh about it now, but like it's really bad because I was away at the weekend. I met someone who I met around this time that had concussions, and I could not remember how I knew them. I can't remember the game. I can't remember anything. He had this conversation with me, and I was like, I can't remember any of this. And it was just like, gee, you have a laugh and a joke about it, but when I sat down with Louise, I was just like, I can't remember half of this. Yeah. There's bits of it that I can remember. Like I remember one game being concussed and then going off the pitch and then going back on again. Because I played front row. The main, I can't remember the whole story, but it might have been, props down, just go back on and play kind of thing. I remember the last concussion I got. I played a warm-up game against Glasgow. Aberdeen played Glasgow. Physical game, not a problem. Got through it. This was after a 6-month break. We're sorted, good to go. We played Kirkcaldy, which was a team a league below us. Quite a derby game. It was like the smallest of glancing blows, but I remember the blow. I can remember getting carried back or back to the change rooms, and I just remember being sick, for quite a period of time. And then that's when it was really bad. But like I was my own worst enemy. I think like I didn't really know how bad concussions were or what a concussion really was, and it was never taken seriously. I remember I was just like trying to do things, and we did a HIA test with one of the clubs I was at, and I just remember the boys just like typing in random buttons and, you know, giving stupid questions, because the mindset was, well, you know, if we get a bang on the head, if we give bad answers now, you know, I'll reflect and we'll get on to carry on playing. You know, and you know, players lie. You know, you want to play. And the funny thing is, if you remember House, that medical drama, you know, the guy, I forgot who plays the main character, is just like, people lie. You don't trust them. So, you know, educate the coaches and the players. You know, it's been great so far, but it can improve and get better.
Yeah, it's funny you say that you were sick, because I talked to Jamie Cudmore a few months back, and he had a famous concussion in the semi-final of the Champions Cup. Eventually played on, and after the game, he couldn't drink, he couldn't do anything like that. All the guys went out for a drink in the night, and he couldn't go out. He had to go to bed, and the final was 2 weeks later. Plays the final, gets another concussion, and he's throwing up in the changing room. And the medic goes, "Oh, it's just nerves." And you say players, but Jamie Cudmore actually said, "No, like I'm concussed here." Do you know what I mean? Like, and unfortunately for him, the other second row partner he had, Van Mahina, come off injured, so he had to come back on. You talked about HIA there. What is a HIA test? I know we all see the players go off the pitch, and we know it's 10 minutes, but what's involved in the HIA test?
Before we talk about the HIA test, can I just point out that whenever Stuart had these head knocks, I wasn't there, because they were either away games or they were pre-season games, and this was back in like 2012, and I kind of feel like at that time I was very much this lone voice saying, any head injury, you need to come off. And no matter, and I've always thought that, because do you want to know, at the end of the day, it's an amateur game, and all of these players have a career, they've got work to go to. It is not worth it. They're not earning their fortune playing rugby. So there's absolutely no need for them to be playing. It's only a game, do you know? And don't get me wrong, I am the most competitive person ever, but it is not worth the potential risks to your future and to your future job.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I'll tell you about what the HIA, what the head injury assessment just now is so it's called a Scat Score. Sports concussion assessment tool, which is what we use, and we're on version 5 just now. And it's a standardized tool that's used to assess for concussion. There's key points in it, though, in that if you've got any athlete who's got a suspected concussion, they should just be removed from play. So irrespective of what the HIA score is, if you think that person's been concussed, which you've already kind of, by taking them off to do this assessment, you've kind of already implied that you think that they've got a concussion, so it doesn't matter what they score. So the first thing is that you kind of look for observable signs, like what have you witnessed? Was the player lying motionless? Is there evidence of kind of incoordination, any kind of disorientation? Are they confused or dazed or have like that blank facial expression? And then the next bit is a memory test, which is just a Maddox score. And again, I can't really say, but it's a score that has been used for years and years in rugby. And it's, do you know where you are? What's your venue? Which half are you in? Who scored last? Who did you play last week? And did you win the last game? But like, even if you're pretty knocked out, you could still answer that by just having a look around you, you know? Next part of it's Glasgow Coma scale, which again, to my mind, if you're having to assess somebody's Glasgow Coma scale, they shouldn't be doing an HIA assessment, because they should have a Glasgow Coma scale of 15, and if they don't have a Glasgow Coma scale of 15, they shouldn't be playing. And that's just a medical assessment of consciousness, so like eye movement, motor movement, and verbal. Then you give the player a list of symptoms, and you get them to evaluate where they are on that. you do a cognitive screening, which is just looking at orientation, immediate memory. So you give them a list of words, but Stuart can tell us a little bit about that later on. So you get this list of words and you have to, it's your immediate recall and then concentration. So like the month of the year backwards, or remembering a sequence of duets. And then you do a neurology screen, getting them to read aloud, follow instructions, do finger-nose coordination and tandem gait. And then you go back to do delayed recall. So like those words that you got given earlier on, you have to give them back.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, it's a really good score for assessing for return to play, but I find it hard to justify using that as a score, as a tool to let people go back to play. Yeah. Return to play on the pitch 10 minutes after you've taken them off because they've got suspected concussion.
I'm talking to Adam Hughes. Adam Hughes retired after repetitive concussions, the Dragons player, and he was quite bullish, just like you there, saying, you know, if players have a head injury, why are they even trying to do these tests? Why are they even trying to put them in a position to come back on the field? And more players I talk to, I try to sort of talk to the players from the 80s, 90s to the present day. And Stu, did their cold flannel work at all? Because that's what they used back then, didn't they?
Sorry, I've missed that bit.
The cold sponge. Did they ever use the cold sponge on you?
Oh, the cold sponge. No, I managed to dodge that. I think it's the case of I'll put my hand up. I lied to try and hide that I had a head knock, and it'd be like, you know, you got a sore knee, you've hurt your knee, or you do something else to try and mask that, you know, you needed a moment. It was the same with and like you would say, like, you know, you've got to hurt your knee or your back was sore, so you could get you know, give yourself a bit of time to recover. But you touched on it earlier. You can go and get an MRI and a scan, and you can see there's an injury. But if you get one on your brain, you know, it doesn't really show. You know, and I think it's quite one of those ones that players and coaches are very like, you know, if you can't see it, it's not an injury. And I think that's just a mindset we've got to get out of, because you know, it's a very important part of our body that controls our body, controls our life, and if we don't look after it, it's, you know, the big repercussions.
Yeah, go on, Louise.
Can I just say, Stuart, do you want to talk through about like all the things that we did, or maybe talk through a little bit more about like what, because I think a lot of the symptoms of concussion are maybe not very well recognised or understood by players. So like one of the even very minor head injuries, I will always tell the players that don't be anxious if you get a little bit kind of emotionally labile or like burst into tears at the drop of a hat, or get really irritable or like annoyed by little things that maybe wouldn't necessarily annoy you. And also don't worry if it's like concentration and like concentrating on a screen, and even going back to work can be hard if you've had like a fairly significant concussion, you know. So I'll quite often tell players if they do work in an office and they're doing a lot of screen time, that they should probably be taking 2 or 3 days off until they feel completely asymptomatic and absolutely fine. Their headache's settled, they don't have any nausea or vomiting, or dizziness or anything like that.
Oh, Stuart's gone now.
I know. Just a little chat. Nathan, sorry.
Well, it's like the Graham Norton show now, isn't it? Well, I was going to say to Stuart about sort of how it affects his family. Have you dealt with players who've sort of been affected in their sort of ordinary lives? Well,
I'll tell you a little bit about Stuart, because he won't mind. But whenever we sat down to chat to him, he genuinely didn't really remember anything that had been going on. And whenever what had happened was at the end of a couple of seasons, or sort of just before Christmas time, I'd taken him off because he did have a head knock and he did a return to play, but his symptoms kind of never really settled. And he always insists that he's never had any head injuries up until that season. But I'm not entirely sure I believe him, because It was like a fairly. He was lying, I think.
It was longer, wasn't it?
And then he's not here to defend himself, so I guess. And then we gradually did a return to play with him, but it took him a while to get back, And then he eventually got back, played a game. I think he maybe played a couple of games, got another head knock. And I just told it, and that was maybe January, February time, and I told him that he wasn't allowed to play the rest of the season, which did not go down very well at all. But at that stage, I think that his symptoms actually were fairly bad, and in that he was irritable with his family. He didn't have any patience with them. I think if I remember rightly, he was quite emotionally labile, and he was coaching at that time as well. And he would write a team sheet that didn't make sense. He would miss his meetings because he maybe knew he had a meeting, but he didn't know where it was or what time it was or what it was with regards to. So it massively impacted his family, I'm sure.
And
I was so worried about him that we sent him up to the neurosurgeons, we sent him to the psychologists, just to try and see what we could do to improve him.
Yeah, and you talked of should the IRB have something sort of in place to deal with these sort of emotional things that are happening at home? Do you think?
It's a really difficult situation because Stuart's a very, possibly not an unusual case, but he was certainly a very at one end of a spectrum where the majority of head injuries are very mild. Your symptoms maybe last a couple of weeks at most. Sometimes it can last up to 6 months. But to have ongoing symptoms the way he had been is unusual.
Oh, hey, what's going on here?
As if by magic, I blame it all on all the dubs. I'm going to relate all my family now. Where I live down here, half of Dublin sort of decamped itself down, and because we're having staycations and lost everything, it just all turned off. And
we were just saying you're on about us, and now it happened to you.
Exactly. I thought it was the only one that was going to be secure. So I was watching it on 4G on my phone, and I thought you were doing grand there, lads. I
want back in.
Listen. Thanks very much to Nathan Parker for all the floor. That is a true professional. Nathan, Stuart, and Lou. You're welcome to the show. I have to give a special shout to Johnny Wappett. There's a guy called Peter Robinson, whose son Ben died back in, I think it was 2013-14, Peter, and Ben at 14, and there's nothing that we can say, but we hope that just by getting the message out there and keeping that chat going about things, that it doesn't happen to anybody else. So please, you're welcome to the show, and I thought to you and to everybody else. Again, Stuart, having sort of struggled more than most people through from a player position as well. So great to be back in, and thank you. You're welcome to the joint Don't Give a Ruck podcast with Three Blokes, Ball BOD. Actually, it's Don't Give a Ruck podcast, and Joe Shep comes in and out when he wants to as well. To Louise McCullough and to Stuart Corsa from Big Rig Rugby, you're more than welcome as well. I'm trying to turn Stuart's mute off. I think he must have got himself on mute because I can't amend it at all. You're welcome to the show, lads. Been great to listen on the phone. Please crack on where you were. It was great.
Yeah, we were sort of talking about how maybe the IRB could step in, and Louise was talking about the emotional side of it and how it affects your sort of home well-being. And as again, I talked to Jamie Cudmore a few months back, and he was saying he was very irritable and being horrible to his family for no reason out of nowhere. And Louise, what can be done about these? Can the IRB take over, or can rugby unions take over?
It's really difficult because there's no real treatment for things like that. Whenever I was originally met Joe, I was telling them that myself and a friend of mine who does a lot of kind of my kinetic chain release and soft tissue release, we did a little pilot study of about 45 people who had concussions or had multiple head knocks through combat sports, and doing a particular soft tissue release, it's a posterior fascial melt, and that certainly improves their symptoms. But because it was just a pilot study, we didn't have any money or funding for it. It was kind of fairly short-lived. But certainly those people that Nicola treated had a significant improvement in their symptoms, and I think that would be really something worthwhile to look at more. But it's just getting funding for things like that, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's a quick fix. I think it's very much everything should be aimed at preventative medicine for sure.
So, Stu, can I just come with you? The effect that I'm assuming you can hear us now. I know your signal's really sort of glitchy there. I'm over my badge, but the effect on you as a person and on your family and on your life when you were going through all of this.
Yeah, I mean, it was a tough time because obviously with the concussions, like for me, it was the mood swings and forgetfulness. I mean, I had quite a few different symptoms. So, I mean, I wasn't great to live with, to be fair. Like, so I just, had a newborn son as well, and I couldn't focus. So, I couldn't sit in front of a laptop. I couldn't drive long distances. If there was more than one or two noises, I'd just be, I'd flip off. And, it me and my partner to split up for a while as well. And, that was, probably the root problem of it was down to that. And then also coming to the other side of that was like, obviously stopping playing rugby. So mentally it was probably a tough time because I had to stop doing something which I loved. But then there was also all the symptoms of having a concussion. So I was coaching in schools as well at the time. And, you'd be in the middle of speaking to the kids and you just lose train of thought. You'd just be standing there and being like, I've completely forgot what I'm doing here. And then, you sit in front of a computer or a TV, 10, 15 minutes, you might be doing reports or, doing stuff. Just couldn't do it. Drive down to Edinburgh to do a coaching course and that. You drive down 10 miles down the road and you just have a splitting headache. And it was just like, couldn't do it. Or you'd forget where we were meant to be. So you'd write everything down in a book, but then you'd lose the book. So I can laugh about it now, but I have to laugh about it because, the more I look at it now, the more that I realize how badly it affected me. And, there's still traits of it now. Like if I'm not sleeping well or eating well, or it does affect me. Like I still get that bit of memory, and I can be snappy as well, which is frustrating because it could be over nothing as well. And then I'll just go from 0 to 100 and, out. But I've know now how to look after myself, which is a big thing. So trying to keep away from the computer screens and eat and sleep well, and exercise is a big thing as well. But then everything that I love to do involves contact. So I hate running, I hate cycling, I love boxing, love wrestling, and I can't do any of that. So it's it's a tough sort of cycle with that as well. But yeah, I mean the long-term effect. It's taken a while. Sorry,
we were talking before just about if the IRB could do anything to help sort of that emotional ability. So I don't know what your thoughts would be on that. If there's anything that I could have done to improve that for you, or to reassure you, or because it might be useful to talk about now what happened, like going to the hospital and what tests and things that you had and who you saw.
Yeah, I mean, it was tough because I guess like a player, like I lied and hid the injuries, and probably just the same in the home life. I hid it from everyone. Like, to be fair, I would try to just keep it all to yourself, or kept it all to myself, which was probably the worst thing to do looking at it now. But retrospect's a great thing but it was a tough for me because I was a paid I was a paid player, but I was also at the club as a development officer, was an employee, and you didn't want to, for me, obviously a new child as well, you don't want to be going into your boss and saying, I can't do this because of X, Y, and Z. I just try to hide things and try and sort of put my head down and get on with it. And that's probably the old-fashioned way of doing things. And I never went to any of the staff or really to say, sorry?
It's a meal thing.
It's a meal thing, yeah. We're stubborn.
Head in the sand mentality.
It is. So,
but assuming now though that it's the slightest things for you, though, Stu. You know, you literally got to manage. You know, even sort of running around and sort of, you know, it's that prolonged thing that you have to now manage for the rest of your life. And I ask that because the simple things for you, because that will lead me on to another point in a minute. But yeah, how does that affect you, this sort of day to day?
It's so like even doing a roly-poly in the garden with the kids, like that, just that movement in a roly-poly or spinning round on the roundabout, I can't do that with the kids because even doing it once, that's me, like, I feel sick. Like, it's just, you know, any sudden movements. Like, we drove back from Gairloch at the beginning, windy road, and I just felt like a dog. You know, it was just, you know, movement left and right. It was like seasickness, basically. And I have spent a lot of time on buses. I've been on the back roads to nowhere, and it's never bothered me. But then, obviously now, that really affects me. Is being on a long, windy road is just a nightmare for me now. But again, it's just you just got to try and cope and manage with it, like.
Absolutely. That does lead me on to my second point. I'm trying to make up for it now that I've been off knee for so long. But, almost, you know, like you get PTSD, Lou. We spoke about this. Traumatic stress disorder.
God, he can't ask a question, but I love no money.
I think what he was going to say, I think what he was trying to say was that earlier on we were talking about PTSD and post-concussive syndrome. There's an association between the two. And I have to say I haven't read very much into it, but my understanding is that a lot of post-traumatic stress disorders, whenever you're involved in that kind of battle scenario with lots of explosions and a lot of those are concussive events really as well. So I think that there's a correlation between post-traumatic stress disorder and post-concussion syndrome. And I think that there's a bit of research going on just now in the States with regards to that. But like I say, there's so much research going on just now into the sort of long-term effects of concussions and multiple concussions. So like in the NFL, in football and in rugby. It's interesting times, but it's a really complex area because there's so many other brain pathologies that can be going on at the same time that it's difficult to know which is actually the primary pathology and what's just like whether that's just a secondary to your sport. And like, don't get me wrong, concussion can be terrible, and Stuart is a prime example of like the very worst, a very bad end of the spectrum, you know. But at the same time, that you have to consider, we as professionals within sport, we need to protect our players so that they can go back and have all the benefits of exercise and team sport, and try and encourage that, but try and do that in the safest way as possible. And that's why it's so important for like return to play and the Scat scoring for them, and just really making sure that people are completely asymptomatic before they go back, and that people understand the importance of telling what your symptoms are. Because if you don't share that, then it's very hard for us to kind of support you and kind of look after you and to get back.
Yeah, and you mentioned there about the NFL. Obviously, there was huge legal battles with concussion and all out there. Now, obviously, with football over here, that there's talk of banning heading the ball. Lou, have you dealt with players from other sports that have had concussions?
So my main sports would be kind of like rugby. Oh, they're all contact sports really anyway. So rugby,
Oh, Louise is gone now.
Oh no. We're having the joys today. But I know, like Louise saying, like she's really into all her combat sports. I'm sure she's seen a fair bit as well. And like as you say, like I enjoy the boxing and wrestling and that kind of stuff as well. But when the interesting thing is that those guys, the Muay Thai guys, combat sports wrestlers, they all exercise their neck. And I think something that we don't really do much in rugby, especially with our youth as well. We think about how much our neck is in contact, and Lou said earlier on about that whiplash motion, that if we can strengthen our players' necks, that can hopefully help reduce those kind of injuries. And I think Magpie, I say it's not stealing, it's Magpie, taking ideas from other sports and trying to put them into rugby to try and obviously help with players prevent or try and reduce the risk of concussion. It would be a massive thing.
Yeah. And Louis, you back? I think Louis can even hear us now. So we talk about rugby, and it's only been the last 5 years, Stuart, that we've really talked about concussion. And as we talked about at the start of the programme with the George North back-to-back concussion he had against England, I think a lot of people slate rugby union for saying, why are they doing it now? But when you look at it, rugby's been around for over 200 years, but it only turned amateur 25 years ago. Do you know what I mean? And do you think that's one of the main reasons why we're only sort of looking at it recently, and obviously with the development of bigger players as well?
Yeah, I think the bigger players is a massive thing, and bigger players, more subs, and you look at some of the old school videos of rugby. Very athletic, very agile. Quick flow in rugby. Whether sometimes the day it's just it can be some games of big lads just crashing into each other and not attacking the space, and so I mean that's got to make a big difference. Players fitter, bigger, faster, and this is obviously going to lead to more concussions.
And obviously we know that you've had concussions. Do you know of anybody else that you played with that have had concussions and you've had to sort of pass on your wisdom?
Yeah, so not just long after I got concussed, we had a player who was, he was just doing his standard grades at the time. I remember him getting concussed, and I found this out, spoke to him, his parents and his coach, and said, look, you can't play next week. Something similar. It was like a final the week after, and left it at that. And then 2 weeks later, I found out that he played in that final and got another concussion. And unfortunately for him, he ended up basically missing a whole year at school, and basically had to push back his exams because he just couldn't concentrate. He really struggled. So now that was a kid that was like 15, 16 years old that and probably just didn't take on advice, thinking it was a head knock. Same with the coach, and obviously had a lasting effect on him. But thankfully now he's all right and he's moved on. But there was him, Rory Lamont as well, who played with. He's suffered with head knocks. Also, Glasgow, when Ewan Murray got knocked out at the old Glasgow ground, and I remember that being pretty horrific as well. I mean, he was completely unconscious, and then when he came back through, and so you've seen it a lot in rugby. I've seen it a lot of the players and friends, but again, the attitude was, unless it was like Ewan's, who were completely knocked out, people just kind of got on with it. We spoke about this in the championship, that a lot of the rugby players, you're fighting every year for a contract, and a head knock is an injury, or is it an injury? I think is a lot of people's thinking, and they try and hide it so they can play, because, as I say, if you're out injured for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, that's reducing your chance of hopefully picking up another contract, and and I think that is a lot of pressure on a lot of players.
And is that still the mindset today, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I love rugby, great sport, you get a lot from it, but unless you're in the top level, you're not earning life-changing money. It's hand to mouth sometimes, and it's 1 year, 2 year contracts, which unless you're from a lucky background where you can get supported, or you've got interest in other areas, you're continually trying to fight to making sure that you've got a job at the end of the year. And a lot of players, not just concussion, but players will hide injuries to try and make sure that they're shown to be fit and selected by coaches.
And I was talking about Jamie Cudmore earlier, and the sort of how they are in France. It's almost like you only have like 8 days off, because literally in France you have to play every week, and that's your contract. I remember the Wales-France game a few years ago where the game went to 100 minutes. I don't know if you remember, France won in the 100th minute, and I was heartbroken. But the prop for France pretended that he had a concussion, and the referee was like, "Have you got a concussion?" He was like, "Well," he's looking at his medics. He's going, "I don't know. Should I say I've got a concussion?" And do you think there should be like a sort of flagship where, and it's probably the worst time at the moment because of obviously COVID, but last year when the World Cup was on, the concussion was what everybody talked about. It was in the papers every single day, the high hits, the changing of the laws. Do you think the IRB need to get hold of this now and say, there's one rule for everyone? Because people do, there are rugby union, the French rugby union, they do things differently, don't they?
Yeah, I think that there's just slightly, everyone does their own kind of thing, and there has to be some sort of, IRB have to take it by the nuts and bolts basically, and just sort of say, right, this is how we're doing it, this is what should happen. And I say the Hia test on rugby, it should be a professional player. It doesn't matter what level you are. If you've got a head knock, you come off, and that's it for at least a week. Then do the retest, or 2 weeks if need be. But there's no point on a professional player to get a head knock and come off for a test and go back on. It just shows a bad example for coaches and players, and it just makes a mockery of it basically. It needs to be looked at, and someone has to take it to the top, and they have to lead by example. The professional players, I mean, guys like George North and that should know better. They should be able to say, no, I'm not going back on that pitch because it's my livelihood in the long run, and it's their health. They should be able to walk off.
And Lou was just put in the chat now. I know we've lost her, but she's still here in spirit. Yeah. She said the changing of the tackle laws actually increased the concussion incidence, and I probably agree with that. And because Adam Hughes, one of his concussions was Josh Navidi running down the wing and him making a low tackle and his head hitting the knee. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean most of my head knocks were tackling around the knees and stuff, but we need to look at how we need to look at how we coach the tackle and that, and what we're looking at. I think we're too much focused on strength and size, whereas we need to be working on players being agile and and mobile, flexible, and that means that players can get into the right position. You tend to see like big slow lads, or people are moving at pace. We have to be able to adjust our body angles to make that correct contact point. Yeah. If you've got a big lump on the field who's tired, who's not physically fit after 65 minutes, they're just going to throw themselves into the contact area and hope for the best. What we need to be doing is making sure that our players are know how to tackle properly. But it's a lot of the big guys aren't flexible enough, and they just dive. They don't put their foot in close, and that's just a risk that happens. I remember one of my instances was I was hanging, caught out in the wing as a prop. Worst place ever. Got stepped on the inside and went for one shoulder, put my head in front of him, and that was me, gone. And so, there's lots of. But the other thing with that as well, we've got to be. It's a good thing that there's been more reports of concussion, because I guess there's that fear of it now being that sort of hidden injury. I think more people now are putting their hand up and saying, yeah, look, I've got a head knock, I've got symptoms. So I mean, it's a good thing as well that it's these cases are getting reported and are a lot higher, because there's honesty between the players and their medical staff. So it's two things we've got to look at there with that.
Yeah, and Lou's given us some great stuff. The head, if the head's in the wrong position, and that's a big part of it, I'm sure. And I did my thesis on preventions of concussion, and there was a lot of, you know, sort of tests with head gears and stuff like that. And it was actually proven that players with head gears had less regard for their body because they thought it protected their head, so they were flying into tackles. Is there a big issue with maybe defense coaches and, you know, teaching young players to tackle properly from an early age?
Yeah, I think, you know, we need volunteers in rugby. I mean, you know, we need them. They're the heart and soul of rugby. But, you know, are they coaches? You know, we do a lot of coach education and stuff, but then they don't maybe see in depth. Like, you know, little Billy Bob was putting his head in the wrong place. They'll maybe say, no, you know, maybe not go into as much depth to help him out, or they might not break it down for him to understand. You know, they might look at him once or twice, tell him what to do roughly, and then they just leave him be. But they'll never, you know, they might not go in, they might not support these players enough, or have enough knowledge to support each other, the other coaches, other players. So it's a tough one, that, because we need to educate the coaches. So if we've got better coaches that understand the whole breakdown of the tackle, hopefully it should reduce reduce concussions and injuries. You know, we still get the players, you know, tackling with hands out as well. Problems with the shoulders. So, you know, the tackle area is just a massive thing. You know, there's companies looking at, you know, coaching equipment, which helps improve the tackle area, but I'm still getting parents and players coming to me saying, "Oh, I've got a head guard, you know, I'll save me from concussion." It's like, no, that's not right. You know, save you from getting a cauliflower lug or a cut to the head, but, you know, it's not to prevent concussion. And it's again, it's the knowledge is better, but I guess we've got to keep pushing it more out. Yeah,
and Lou says it makes players think they're more invincible, doesn't it? And it does. Did it protect the cauliflower for years with you, or did you not wear one?
No, I've got two. I ripped my ear off as well, so
lucky you.
I think I only wore it once, you know, and I hated it, so it just came off. I went for the old David Soul look and a bit of black tape around the lugs, and that was me for a while. But no scrum. I was just love contact and threw my head in everywhere. So I think that was my massive problem. I loved hitting things, so I'd probably no disregard for my body with a scrum cap or not. So,
well, before we finish, I think probably both of us we should say our piece on what should be required to prevent more concussions. What's your final say on the matter?
To prevent it, I think just more knowledge and education. I think we need to educate the players, and if it's, again, maybe a social media, you know, hit with the kids and telling them what the symptoms are and what the big issues are, and also just educating the coaches on how to tackle and just keep sort of refreshing that every couple of months and making sure these guys are up to speed. And we don't need gym rats in the rugby pitch. We need skillful players that are flexible, agile, and can put their body into a safe position to make a proper tackle.
How's it going, guys?
Fine.
I feel bad for Nathan because I've been like typing away, ranting.
Myself.
I can't. I'm 300 meters from the beach. You can't hear because I've just closed the window over. But there's some sort of storm coming across now, and it's just, I had to go downstairs and reset it twice. It's completely knocked all into that. I had no 4G. I got an initial message from Lou saying, "Can you let me in?" I can't access the studio from a mobile, obviously, because the nature of it's only allowed to be done from Property Thing system. But it's look, I can only thank Nathan and Stuart and Lou as she was on for carrying the show on. It's one of those things. Two things are going to come out of this. One is I'm going to rerun the show again at some time in the immediate future. And a pile of the questions have come out tonight, and some of the ideas we're going to frame it in a different way and redo. It is one of those. You can hear that storm now. It's one of those things you have absolutely no control. After everybody worrying, Stuart worrying that he's up in the bowels of the attic there on his phone, Nathan with his thunderstorms.
I'm the king of the Wi-Fi in Wales, man. Come on.
And he's absolutely free, and I'm on super broadband here. Everything gets absolutely knocked out. Actually, well, I better go and pass the car down in a minute. But listen, the whole serious point is, I would like to thank. I blocked 2 people tonight, lads, and I make no apologies. I don't get this very often on our shows. I only have to do it once before. But it's very, very, very serious subject tonight. So people coming on who are talking about utter crap when we are this. So I can only apologise on behalf of everybody in my Three Blokes, Ball BOD group that we have somebody come on. I have no control over them, other than it was fortunate enough that at least when I was out on the phone, I could delete the comments and I could block them directly. They will never be allowed back onto the show again. So my apologies for those ignorant people on that, and thank you for the people who spoke out against them. Some phenomenal stuff. In fact, Peter Robinson. Pete, I'm going to make contact with you, and I would like to invite you on to the show if you would like to come on and talk, because I think that would be really powerful. At Three Blokes, all of the shows and stuff, like the stuff that Nathan does as well. It's about telling the story, about real life though. It's about, we leave clickbaiting and rubbish to other people. It is about trying to get a message across on how we can help other people to do things in a better way. I have to thank Stuart for his openness and his honesty. Since day one of meeting him, and we've never met physically, like 97.8% of the people who we have on our panelists across the globe in 2.5 years, I've never met them, and yet I am close with a lot of them because they open up. And I can only thank you, Stuart Corsa, for your honesty and your openness and refreshing to try and help other people, because there was something that came out of another show that we watched recently, and you said yourself about the fact that people are hiding things. What protocols can we put in place, Stu, from, you're a youth coach now, successful academy, growing and growing, but it was some great stuff coming through from the viewers there before about what can IRB World Rugby do. What can you do working together with unions, with World Rugby, so that from the grassroots level building upwards, that you can put in place almost like standard weekly, daily, monthly checks that you'd be able to do? Is that possible to do?
Yeah, I think we need some way for players to, to interact with other people, whether it be someone that can support them or with other players that have maybe been through similar experiences, and just have open conversations. And I think it's quite hard for some players because they get forced from coaches, parents, and external pressure, and to perform, and sometimes to hide things. And I think we need to try and set up something where we can support players of all ages. I mean, especially youth, but for everyone, we need something that we can help each other out and just be a bit more open and honest about it.
Absolutely.
Concussion or post playing or whether it be in rugby.
I didn't hear that we touched on it, lads, but very, very briefly. There are some things that I think Lou, you said that you're doing in Scotland that I know they do in New Zealand on the size and weight ratio of a child, because we know some of the kids are getting bigger now. Can we just chat through, just have 2 minutes for that before we sort of wrap up? And is that a big help, do you think, for the future? Can you explain that to us?
What we were talking about earlier on was the age group. So players can play up depending if they can meet the certain criteria. Stuart, you probably know more about it than I do. Mm-hmm. It's like grip strength testing and things.
Yeah, so a player can play up an age group as long as it's not in the front row. They can do like press up, squat, and making sure they can do it properly with all the correct key points, and then they've got to be able to complete an X amount of tackles, with head in the right place. And depending on the ages as well, they might have to go down to Murrayfield and get strength tested and stuff as well. So I mean, there is protocols there to try, and it's tough because we do get some big players that need to be play up a level, because they need to be challenged. And big kids playing against little kids, big kids don't learn anything, and those are the guys that'll be at risk to injury because when they get to kids their own size, they'll not know how to have hold their body in contact. They won't know how to make a proper tackle because they've always been tackling against a little wet kid that they can just throw off the pitch. So for me, I think having kids of equal size playing against each other is more beneficial because it gives the little kids a bit more confidence, and the big kids will learn more skills and will have to learn how to, proper tackle or contact techniques. So, whether it's ages, is that a good thing? Not sure. Should it be weight size? I'd be probably more down that side. But the SRU are quite good. They do have, sort of protocols and procedures in place for players to play up through age groups or going into adult rugby. So we do have some safety measures there.
Yeah, brilliant. That's great to see. Lou.
I was just going to say the only other thing that we were mentioning earlier on was about women's rugby and women in contact sports. And there's evidence to say that women who play any contact sport with similar rules with the guys, with the same contact, they're actually at double the risk of concussion. And it's unfair to say that it's just a girl thing, but it may simply be because girls are better at reporting it. There is evidence to suggest that their symptoms are worse. Their symptoms can be more prolonged. So I would just be more cautious maybe about bringing, if you've got a female player who's had a concussion, maybe like considering just giving them a longer time before in their return to play. So it's just something to consider. I don't know whether it's a mechanical thing or whether it's a hormonal thing, or I don't actually know what the scientific basis of it is, but there is evidence to say that women who are in contact sports with similar rules have greater symptoms and longer duration of symptoms of concussion.
Yeah, brilliant, superb. Jenny Whopper was just saying there, the honesty from Stuart's been so refreshing. The technical knowledge from Lou and Nathan has been great input. The importance of the education at the youngest possible level could help with the next generation of young people playing any form of sport and physical activity. Yeah. I would just point out tonight that nobody is discrediting the work of the medics or the physios or the doctors at games and stuff like that. We just sometimes don't understand, and I think a lot of it comes down to a player who has to be honest enough at whatever level they're in. And I think Stu bears this out because it's about educating people, and it's about that engagement thing. And it's must be a difficult decision if you've got to give up something that has been your what's the expression, Stu? That's been your lifelong dream. I can only imagine, what you would have to have gone through, for that. And there before you have gone many, and currently there are many. And I just hope that post-COVID, where we've allowed people to come back and have a break away from the rugby, that we can reappraise and reset where we are and what we're doing. So I think that's fine. Lou, leave us one thought that you would like to see in the next, post coming out of COVID now, that in an ideal world, now that we've reset and we're going local, then global, that you would like to see in relation to this, because effectively we're starting again in real terms.
If in doubt, set them out. If you have any thoughts that you've got a player who's had a head injury or concussion, don't let them back on the pitch again. You can reassess them afterwards. If they're completely asymptomatic and past the return to play, they can go back and play next week. But if you've got any concerns and you're taking a player off for a head injury, they shouldn't be going back on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Stuart, where
exactly the same as Lou. If in doubt, sit them out. As a coach, we've got responsibility for the players, and if they've got any notion that they've had a head knock, just take them off. It's not worth it. From a youth point of view, social media, let's get something out there that's hammering the kids and all the social media. That's what they love being on. So let's hammer that, and let's make sure they're educated, because there will still be some old dinosaurs out there who've got no regard for their players. So we've got to educate the youth and the players that are coming up and the new batch of coaches. And from the top end, let's make sure that the professional player is responsible enough to put a hand up and come off the pitch. And I or B just saying, like, you're not going back on HIA. 10 minutes is not worth your career. You're off the pitch, and that's it. And we'll assess it a week later.
Yeah,
We really
absolutely.
need some high-profile players to really reinforce that, because there's so much negative reinforcement, really, that we really need high-profile people who are willing to stand up and say, if in doubt, sit them out.
Yeah, absolutely. Nathan.
Yeah, well, all I'll say is exactly there. High-profile players. You get the likes of Dan Bigger, who's on 600 grand a year now, and money's so big these days in rugby. Who would have thought the players could be on that much? Dan Bigger's out. The medic says he's out for 3 months. That club will try and get him back in a month, and unfortunately, that's the way the game's going at the minute. It's all money orientated, and as Stuart said about contracts, he's right. Players of that ilk, the Jamie Cudmores who have suffered with it, the high-profile ones, they need to come out now, tell their story, and I think it is happening. And the IRB are doing everything they can to it, and hopefully we can improve year on year.
Good, guys. Bit of a disjointed show. I'm just listening to this storm which outside my window now. I'm glad I'm on the inside. Our thanks to and apologies to the two clowns who should know better and will never again see the light. We're going to go again then. They're going to see the light of day. Mark.
Oh, he's gone again.
The storm's got him again.
He really wants to wrap it up. I'll wrap it up anyway. Thank you very much for coming on. You've been a great guest. And Stuart, thanks for your time.
My pleasure.
You're very welcome anytime.
And we'll have to do this again, I think, when we've all got better faster Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should all leave the chat right now. I think right at the same time, just in case Joe comes back.
Ladies and gentlemen, I can't even see whether I'm actually live anymore. My